The suitcase hit the floor with a thud. "Get out of my house! You're not my real father!" Her words cut sharper than a knife. In the middle of a Beverly Hills mansion, a man who had worked 3 jobs to raise her was tossed aside like garbage. Cameras flashed, glasses clinked, and her fiancé smirked from the leather chair, convinced the old man was nothing but a burden. But what no one in that room knew was that the man they dismissed held secret worth millions, and a plan that would turn their perfect world upside down. Samuel Brooks had never lived for himself. For more than 2 decades, his life revolved around one promise. The promise he made to a frightened 5-year-old girl the night her parents were killed in a car accident. He wasn't a blood relative, just the family's driver back then. But when no one else stepped forward, Samuel did. He raised Vanessa as his own daughter. He gave her the larger bedroom while he slept on the couch, worked nights and weekends to cover her school fees, and sold his car to buy the textbooks she needed for college. To the outside world, Samuel looked like a man who never had much. But to Vanessa, he was supposed to be everything. Now she was 28, a polished lawyer with a corner office in Malibu's most elite firm, engaged to Chase Montgomery, heir to a construction empire. To outsiders, she had it all: a mansion by the coast, a glittering social circle, and a life that seemed untouchable. But Samuel could see the changes. Invitations to family dinners stopped. Introductions at parties grew colder. She never called him Dad anymore, only Samuel. He told himself it was just a phase. That success had blinded her for a while. But deep down, Samuel felt it, the quiet storm building, the moment when all his sacrifices would be repaid not with gratitude, but with betrayal. The first cracks appeared slowly, almost quietly. At charity galas and dinner parties, Samuel noticed the looks. The way Chase's wealthy friends glanced at him with puzzled eyes, as if silently asking why a man like him was sitting at the same table. At first, Samuel brushed it off. He told himself he didn't belong in their world anyway. But the stares grew bolder, the whispers sharper. Introductions shifted. Vanessa no longer called him Dad. Instead, she'd wave him off casually. "This is Samuel. He helped me when I was younger." The word help stung. As if raising her alone, selling everything he had to give her a future, was just a favor she'd outgrown. Then came the dinners where his name never appeared on the guest list. The invitation she once begged him to attend. "Please, Dad, it'll mean so much to me," were replaced with awkward excuses. Chase had convinced her it was better for appearances if Samuel stayed home. After all, what would people think of a high-powered lawyer whose father still drove an old pickup truck? One night, the storm broke. Vanessa's voice cut through the living room like broken glass. "You're not my real father. You were just a man my parents took pity on." Samuel stood silently at the door, suitcase in hand, listening as Chase smirked from the Italian leather armchair. "Finally, love," he murmured. "It's about time." The betrayal was total. The man who had worked 3 jobs so Vanessa could graduate from law school was now being thrown out like a stranger. The photographs of her childhood he once cherished had been hidden, replaced with trophies and awards. Even the garage he had built brick by brick on weekends was now being renovated for Chase's private gym. But the wound cut deeper than rejection. In whispered conversations, Samuel overheard the truth. To Vanessa's new circle, his presence wasn't just embarrassing, it was shameful. Not because he was poor, not because he was old, but because he was black. "Appearances matter in our world," Chase had said, adjusting the $50,000 watch on his wrist. "And let's be honest, Samuel doesn't exactly fit the image." The words echoed in Samuel's chest like a hammer. After decades of sacrifice, love, and loyalty, this was the value placed on him, a man unworthy of standing beside the daughter he raised, dismissed because of the color of his skin and the status he lacked. Samuel packed his few belongings into an old pickup truck and drove away from the Malibu mansion. Behind him, 23 years of memories turned to dust. But he wasn't broken. Not yet. The next morning, he met Robertson, an old friend from his hardest days. Over steaming coffee in a small diner, Samuel recounted everything: the insults, the rejection, the humiliation. Robert shook his head in disbelief. After all you did for her, Sam. I remember you skipping meals so she could eat. Working 3 shifts just to buy her books. She doesn't remember that? She remembers, Samuel said quietly. She just doesn't care. Robert leaned forward. This isn't about embarrassment. It's about money. That Chase guy's got her thinking about inheritance, family wealth. He probably assumes you've got nothing to leave behind. Samuel paused, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. That's what they all assume. He pulled out his phone, sliding it across the table. Robert's eyes widened. On the screen was a balance, $5.5 million. Sam, is this real? The tech company I invested in years ago, Samuel explained. I never told Vanessa. I wanted to know if she loved me for who I was, not what I had. I guess I got my answer. Robert sat back, stunned. For years, Samuel had been underestimated, dismissed as a tired driver, a charity case, an embarrassment. What no one knew was that he had built a fortune in silence, turning sacrifice into quiet power. And now? Samuel wasn't thinking about revenge. Not yet. But something inside him had shifted. He would disappear from Vanessa's life exactly as she demanded. But when he returned, it would be on his own terms. On a stage she could never imagine. Because Samuel Brooks had spent his life being overlooked, underestimated, and rejected. And what Vanessa and Chase didn't realize was that every insult, every humiliation, had only fueled a fire they could no longer control. The night of the gala arrived with the kind of splendor only Malibu's elite could afford. Golden lights lined the entrance of the country club, and luxury cars purred to a stop as photographers scrambled for perfect shots. Inside, champagne glasses clinked, laughter echoed off marble floors, and the air dripped with entitlement. Vanessa walked in wearing an $8,000 designer gown, her hand looped through Chase Montgomery's arm. They posed for photos, basking in the attention. For Vanessa, this was the pinnacle, the moment she truly belonged among the powerful. What she didn't know was that the entire evening had been built on the foundation of the man she had thrown away. Who's hosting? She whispered to a colleague. Some millionaire investor, the woman replied. Name's Samuel Brooks. Ever heard of him? The name barely registered. In the flurry of greetings and conversations, Vanessa let it slip away. At exactly 8 p.m., the lights dimmed. Jonathan Harrison, the city's most exclusive financial advisor, took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we gather not just to celebrate wealth, but to celebrate purpose. Allow me to introduce the man responsible for this extraordinary evening, Mr. Samuel Brooks. The applause began politely. Then a man in a perfectly tailored tuxedo stepped into the spotlight. The room stilled. Vanessa froze. It was him. Her pulse hammered in her ears as Samuel walked with quiet authority to the microphone. He wasn't the tired man with callous hands she had dismissed days earlier. He was poised, commanding, eyes steady as he faced the crowd. For the first time in her life, Vanessa saw him not as the man who raised her, but as a figure who towered above the very people she had worked so hard to impress. Good evening. Samuel began, his voice carrying easily through the ballroom. Tonight is not about me. It's about the future, about ensuring that talented young people, regardless of their skin color or background, are given the opportunities they deserve. A murmur rippled through the audience. Cameras flashed. But Samuel's eyes were fixed on Vanessa. For 23 years, I raised a young woman as if she were my own. I worked nights, sold my belongings, and gave up everything so she could rise. Last week, I was told I no longer belonged in her life. Why? Because in her new world, the man who raised her was too poor, too old, and too black. Gasps swept across the room. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, stealing glances at Vanessa, who sat pale and trembling. Chase clenched his jaw, but even he couldn't hide the truth unraveling before hundreds of witnesses. Samuel reached into his tuxedo and pulled out a folder. These scholarships, $200,000 a year, will give underprivileged students a chance to walk the same halls my daughter walked, without ever being told they're not worthy. And the $5.5 million I've invested here tonight will prove that no circle, no so-called status, can determine a person's value. The applause that followed was deafening. Guests rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, while Vanessa shrank in her chair. The cameras turned on her, flashing mercilessly. The image was burned into every mind, the ungrateful daughter exposed. Chase tried to salvage it. He stepped forward, hand extended. "Samuel, what a surprise! Vanessa was just telling me." Samuel stopped him cold with a single look. "Please, Mr. Montgomery. Let's not pretend. You said I wasn't part of your social circle. You were right. I'm not. Because I don't measure people by their bank accounts or their last names. I measure them by their humanity." The room erupted again, this time not in polite applause, but in thunderous approval. Vanessa's hands trembled as she clutched her champagne glass. Everything she had built, her career, her engagement, her reputation, was collapsing in real time. For the first time, she realized the devastating truth. The man she had cast aside was the very man her world now celebrated. Samuel stepped away from the microphone, leaving the crowd roaring behind him. His last words lingered like fire in the air. "True wealth is not in what you keep for yourself. It's in what you give to lift others up. Some people learn that too late." And as Vanessa sat frozen, her world crumbling under the weight of whispers and flashing cameras, one question echoed louder than the applause. Could she ever undo the betrayal that had just been revealed to everyone? In the days after the gala, the story spread like wildfire. Newspapers splashed headlines about the driver-turned-millionaire philanthropist. Social media lit up with clips of Samuel Brooks on stage, exposing the painful truth of betrayal and prejudice in front of Malibu's elite. But while the world applauded him, inside, Samuel felt something deeper, a sadness that no amount of money could erase. He had built his life around raising Vanessa. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every dollar saved, it had all been for her. To watch her trade love for status, to hear her measure his worth by the color of his skin and the size of his bank account, that wound would never truly heal. Yet Samuel refused to let bitterness define him. Instead, he turned pain into purpose. The Brooks Foundation was born within weeks of the gala, funded not only by Samuel's $5.5 million but by investors and universities inspired by his courage. Scholarships poured in. Community centers opened their doors. Young men and women who had been told they didn't belong finally had someone in their corner. And Vanessa? Her world unraveled. Henderson and Myers quietly dismissed her, afraid the scandal would tarnish their reputation. Chase Montgomery ended their engagement the morning after the gala. "I can't be associated with this," he had told her coldly. "My family's name is on the line." For the first time, Vanessa was alone. Her luxury apartment sold, her savings dwindling, she found herself sitting in a cheap cafe far from the glamorous life she once flaunted. It was there, one gray afternoon, that her phone rang. The caller ID froze her in place. "Hello, Vanessa? It's Samuel." Her throat tightened. "Samuel, You don't need to explain," he interrupted gently. "I know you're going through a difficult time. That's why I'm calling. I want to offer you something." Hope flickered in her chest. "What kind of offer?" "A job," Samuel said simply. "At the foundation. Entry level. No special privileges. You'll start by organizing documents, by meeting the young people we serve. If you truly want to rebuild, this is the only way." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. "I'll take it." "Don't promise me," Samuel replied. "Prove it." For months, Vanessa worked quietly at the foundation. The salary was modest. The apartment she rented was small. But for the first time in years, she felt something real. She listened to the stories of students who reminded her of the father she had rejected, their struggles, their resilience, their dreams. And slowly, painfully, she began to change. 6 months later, She was helping a young black student apply for an engineering scholarship. The boy looked up at her and whispered, "Thank you, Miss Brooks. This means everything to me." In that moment, Vanessa finally understood. Samuel hadn't taken revenge on her. He had given her a second chance, to learn, to grow, to rebuild what she had broken. One evening, she picked up the phone. "Dad," she said softly, using the words she had abandoned years ago. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Samuel smiled, his heart heavy but warm. "Sometimes, Vanessa, people have to lose everything before they discover what really matters." Years later, Samuel stood on a stage at Harvard University, speaking to a sea of young faces. "I've learned that the best revenge is not destruction," he said, his voice steady. "It's building something so powerful and positive that it transforms lives, even the lives of those who once rejected you. Prejudice, arrogance, betrayal, those things can't defeat you unless you let them. Use the pain. Turn it into fuel. Because in the end, those who judge you by the wrong values always find out too late what they missed." The applause thundered, but Samuel's eyes found Vanessa in the front row. No longer the woman desperate to impress Malibu's elite, but a social worker who had dedicated her life to helping young people overcome the barriers she once helped build. This was his victory, not the wealth, not the headlines, but the proof that love and resilience could outlast hate. And maybe that's the lesson for us all. Because Samuel Brooks' story isn't just about one man or one daughter. It's about every person who has been underestimated because of their skin color, their background, or the neighborhood they came from. It's about the silent strength of those who turn rejection into redemption. So the question is, when the world underestimates you, will you let it break you, or will you use it to build something no one can ever take away?